Welcome to construction class. Here we'll be going through a presentation to talk about job site safety. As we go through the presentation, we're going to talk about things that you need to look out for when you're on a job site, how to be safe, and common things that you need to look for when using tools. As you enter a job site, or in our case a lab, you always need to be aware of your surroundings at all times. Know where you can enter and exit the lab in case of an emergency. Know where know where your telephones are, fire extinguishers, first aid stations, or any other thing that you need to help. Make sure that all connections are grounded safely. That means you need to check the cords of power tools to make sure that they have the 3 prongs, that the cords are not frayed, and that there's no exposed wires. And make sure you keep your area clear. Clean up after yourself after you're done, and make sure that you're using proper ventilation. Make sure you're always wearing the appropriate clothing when you're in the lab. Make sure that you do not have things that dangle so they can get caught into equipment and pull you into it. Make sure you have closed-toed shoes on at all times. Make sure you're properly wearing your safety glasses. Never use a tool that you're not properly trained in. We will be going through videos of how to use each of the tools in our lab and how to use them safely. Make sure you're using the proper tool for its job, and make sure you're using that tool for its intended task. As an example, a screwdriver is not a chisel. A wrench is not a hammer. If you need to hammer something in, you will grab a hammer and use it properly. We'll be learning the difference between hazards, accidents, and injuries as we continue through the presentation. First of all, a hazard is anything that can cause you harm. This can be things that are on the floor, it can be your surroundings all around you, and it can even be the tools that you use. We need to be able to recognize what our hazards are and eliminate all the hazards to the best of our ability. Some examples of hazards are tools that are not stored properly or used properly. Materials that are not being used need to be stored away properly. Any exposed blades or sharp objects, that could be knives, cutting edges, saw blades, or even sharp corners of tables and other obstacles in the lab. Also, make sure that your electrical wires are properly attached and connected. You should not see any frayed wires. You should not see any exposed plugs besides the ones that are intended to be used. Other hazards are things that are left in walkways. This could be materials, it can be tools, it can be even sawdust, and that was created by things that you're doing. Things become very slick when you're on a concrete surface. We need to make sure that we always clean up after ourselves. We also need to make sure that we store chemicals properly. We have a yellow cabinet that stores flammables, so any paint that's not being used, any combustible that's not being used, needs to be stored in that yellow cabinet so it's out of harm. An accident is an unplanned event that results in damage to you or property around you. Nearly all accidents are caused from hazards that no one noticed. So make sure you're always cleaning up after yourself. Make sure you put things away. Make sure you know what people are doing around you and keep yourself under control. An injury is damage done to your body. Nearly every shop or work-related injury can be prevented. Please be careful. The best way to prevent accidents and injuries is to put safety first. Always know what's going on. Things you should look out for: keep your area clean. Clean up after yourself. After you cut a board, pick up your small pieces and throw them away. Never leave power tools or machinery plugged in when you're not using them. So if you're using a circular saw, make sure it's unplugged so that it doesn't actually go off. Make sure your walkways are clear. Clean up your walkways of tools, materials, and anything else that's on the floor. Always clean up your floors, whether it's sawdust or something wet. They can become very slick and cause someone to fall. Keep your dust or fumes down. We have a dust system in our lab. Make sure that it's turned on when you're using it. Always store hazardous material properly. Make sure that you're storing flammable objects in the yellow container in the back of our lab. Mistakes lead to accidents. Always try to do things in positive ways to help avoid injuries and accidents. Make sure you use your tools properly. Make sure you use safety equipment. That includes safety glasses. Make sure you know the habits and attitudes of how you can work safely in the lab and on the job site. Make sure you wear appropriate clothing, and make sure you're always in communication with people around you. Not using tools properly is a common use for accidents and injuries. Make sure you're familiar with the tool. Make sure you know how to use it properly. If you don't know how to use it properly, ask. We will show you, someone will show you. Make sure you've been properly trained to use the tool. Make sure you keep all tools clean and in good working condition. Things will break, that's okay. Just make sure that you tell the teacher or your supervisor that something's not right and it needs to be fixed. We do not always know that something's not working right unless we are told. Make sure you always wear proper safety equipment, or known as PPE. Things could include hard hats, safety glasses, gloves, work boots, hearing protection. In our lab, you will always be required to wear safety glasses. We will provide those for you. Safe work habits and attitudes. Make sure you always have the right frame of mind. Make sure you're not careless. Carelessness leads to more accidents than anything else. As you do repetitive work, you often become careless. You don't think about what you're doing. You start daydreaming, especially when you're using different tools. So as you do things over and over again, always maintain thought on what you're doing and try not to become careless and stay focused. Professional workers or construction workers always have the following qualities: willingness to take responsibility, carefulness, thoughtfulness, concern for safety of others, committed to using proper tools and tools properly, committed to avoiding unnecessary risk, commitment to completing jobs efficiently and safely. Make sure you're always wearing appropriate clothing. In our lab, you're not allowed to have anything that dangles. So if you're wearing necklaces or strings, they need to be tucked in. Long hair needs to be tied back. No earbuds are allowed in our lab. No cell phones are allowed in our lab. Make sure you're always using good communication. Make sure you're always talking to people who are working around you so they know what you're doing. Make sure you let your teachers know what you're doing. And another thing, make sure you always wear closed-toe shoes. To help prevent accidents, make sure you know the following things. Make sure you're properly trained. Make sure you're planning on what you're doing. Prepare. Always know what's around you. Make sure you're aware of the rules of the lab. That's why you're taking a quiz and making sure that you get 100% on it before you step into our lab. Have good communication and housekeeping skills. Use tools safe and know your materials. Know your hazards that are around you. Have safe work habits and positive attitudes. Respect others. You're in the same area. We all need to be careful and look out for each other. How can we recognize hazards? So here are some things that we need to look for. Look for items that will cause an accident or injury. Look for things up above you. Look for things up beside you. Look for things that can fall down. Look for things on the floor. Look for things that can go wrong if left unchanged. Dirty floors, wet floors are examples of those. What are some consequences that could go wrong? People could slip and fall. Items can go flying if are stuck in a saw blade. And then what are the sources of potential hazards? Make sure you always know how to use the tool properly and use it properly. This is the best way to prevent hazards. The most important thing to prevent hazards is developing a safe work ethic and sticking with them. Go with what you've been trained. Always a safe carpenter is most likely to be a skilled carpenter. Always be safe in everything that you do. A good way to prevent accidents in the workplace is to keep your work area clean. Make sure you clean up all spills immediately. Position equipment so that the wires and cables do not create a tripping hazard. This will include the cables and wires to your power tools. Keep walkways clear from trash and other debris. Make sure you clean up after yourself after you make cuts. Secure all rugs and mats so that the edges will not move or curl. Mark physical hazards with warning signs, and make sure you wear appropriate shoes and clothing in your work area. This will include closed-toed shoes and safety glasses, and making sure that things that are tied back, like your hair and strings on jackets. When moving materials, make sure you use rules to help you along. Never try to lift anything that is too heavy. Make sure you always ask for help if things are too heavy to be moved. Make sure you use devices like carts and dollies to help you move things that are too heavy. Position heavy items to where they're going to be used, and make sure you use proper lift techniques. Make sure you wear your PPE or personal protective equipment in the lab. In our lab, safety glasses and closed-toe shoes need to be worn at all times. It will not help you if you do not wear it properly. Glasses need to be over your eyes and not on the top of your head. You should be promoting safety at all times. Make sure you carefully analyze the shop and work area for hazards. Eliminate or minimize the hazards. If you see a hazard, report it to your teacher to make sure that they can correct it. If you see another student doing something dangerous, make sure you help them and correct them and report it to your teacher. Make sure you know the location of your exits, your first aid station, and emergency supplies. Promote safety at all times in everything that you do. Keep your equipment clean and in proper working conditions. If you notice something is not working correctly, make sure you notify your teacher so that it can be fixed. If you have an accident, please make sure you report it to your teacher immediately. At that point in time, the teacher will assess what needs to be done next, if we need to call the nurse or even call 911. The best way to prevent accidents is to make sure that you're always following the safety we listed previously. If not, if something does go wrong, please make sure you report it to your teacher immediately. Make sure you know where your first aid stations are. We have band-aids in our desk, so if you do have an accident, please report it to us and we can get you the things that you need.